Welcome to the latest episode of Rooted Wisdom. I'm Tish Mindemann. Today we will focus on the legal expertise foundations of the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. We will also discuss the ongoing work that supports all of IFAI's services and impacts. This work helps promote tribally driven solutions to revitalize and advance traditional food systems and foster diversified economic development throughout Indian country. In today's episode, we'll hear from Kelli Case, Senior Staff Attorney at IFAI, an organization dedicated to enhancing agricultural opportunities for tribal nations. Kelli has a remarkable background and a deep commitment to her work, and she's here to share her insights into her role and the impact of IFAI's initiatives on tribal nations. Let's jump into our conversation with Kelli.
Chukma, so happy to be here. Yes, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about my background and how I found myself doing some of the work that I love so much. To start with, I am a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, and I was lucky enough to grow up on my tribe's reservation and also really connected with my own tribe. The nation does a ton of great work on outreach and community engagement, and I think my parents were very committed to making sure that I was at every camp and not bothering them at home, or every outreach event, or spending time at the senior site, whatever that might look like. So I felt very connected to my tribe growing up, which was wonderful. I also grew up in a really rural area in Oklahoma, and I think even if you yourself are not directly involved in agriculture, you become kind of ag adjacent just by default growing up in that rural of the community. So those two things combined with some teenage angst that got away from me, to be perfectly honest. I grew up on my family's allotted land or near it, and thought it was normal. Thought that everybody had that kind of access to their history, their roots, their culture. And then sometime around, junior high, found out that was not the case and went through a just righteous anger bout of this can't be true. I can't believe other people don't have access to this. Why is that happening? What is the change that needs to be made? Well, it must be in the law. And I guess the law is how to fix this. I guess I have to be an attorney. And I just rode that out for a couple decades, and it worked out for me career-wise. So those things were a perfect storm. My love for my tribe, my involvement there in my youth, the righteous anger drive accompanied with all of those things, and the fact that I had become ag kid adjacent and then was very involved in FFA as well growing up. So led me to an ag business degree from Oklahoma State University, which was incredibly helpful in law school because I was one of the few folks who didn't hate math there. So that was useful, but ended up doing law school at Tulsa with a specialty in Native American studies as well.
Kelli's story is a powerful reminder of how personal experiences can shape professional paths. Growing up connected to her tribe and community inspired her to blend her passions of law and agriculture. Now, as a senior staff attorney at IFAI, Kelli plays a critical role in navigating complex legal landscapes to support tribal agricultural efforts.
The other piece of this is the fact that out in the world, while I was doing all of those things, we're a group of folks who are very committed to creating places for youth like me, for creating job opportunities that I didn't know existed, for creating a bench of folks that do this kind of work. One of those folks being our founder, Janie Simship, another Chickasaw citizen. She was speaking at a conference, the Chickasaw Dynamic Women's Conference that my mother was at, and my mom came home when I was young and said, "You have to call her. These are all the things that you're always telling me you want to do." And just with incredible hubris of youth, just 18, cold called Janie, said, "I am Chickasaw. I see that you are also Chickasaw. I am really interested in the work you're doing." At this point, she'd already served in a presidential administration. She was starting this organization up from scratch. I had no idea about her incredible background, but I did know that she took off a full half day to show me around and invite me in and share information, as incredibly welcoming as we know her to be, and kind of let me know that this was a path that existed, not just these disparate passions that I had, but they could exist together and serve my community and the people I loved together. So, flash forward 7 years later, I'm getting out of law school, and I had been verbose enough about my passions that my friends knew all of the things I was interested in, and the job posting for IFAI came up just as I was graduating. So had the opportunity to interview with a couple of folks on our staff and start our great work.
IFAI's role is pivotal in bridging the gap between legal complexities and practical agricultural solutions for tribes. Our expertise ensures that tribal governments have the support that they need to successfully implement and manage agricultural initiatives. Kelli has a very unique way of describing IFAI's mission.
So IFAI has an incredibly well-crafted mission statement about all the work that we get to do that our comms team has worked so hard to put together. I can tell you that the short version for why IFAI exists is to be Indian country's ag nerds on call. We understand that there is an incredible opportunities for tribal governments to facilitate agricultural efforts within their communities and within their governments. We also know that tribal governments have a lot of other things to do, right? I imagine if we work in Indian country, like the average is we wear 12-ish hats a piece. Folks have enough stuff going. And also, this is a very niche area of expertise, right? You have somebody who's got a legal background, who knows a little about agriculture, and who's spent a lot of time in Indian country. There's not a lot of us who fit that bill. So, to meet the needs of the 574 plus tribes that are interested in agriculture, how do we create an organization that has that expertise built in? That's the role we serve. I get to be the people, the individual people can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, we're interested in putting together a tribal department of ag, or we're interested in how this regulation impacts what we do, or we'd love to know how to navigate this federal program. I am delighted to be able to do that work and to facilitate it.
In her role, Kelli deals with a wide range of tasks, from analyzing federal regulations to working directly with tribal representatives. Her days are varied and dynamic, reflecting the diverse needs of Indian country.
Indian country and Indian country agriculture specifically exists in a jurisdictional web that is incredibly difficult to navigate, especially if you haven't spent a lot of time practicing it. And even when you have, you spend a lot of time wishing for a flow chart. They exist, but they aren't always accurate to what you need. So having folks on board in our crew that can help navigate the legal pieces of how do you account for all of these jurisdictions? How do you put together centuries of case law and laws that conflict with each other and treatment that differs by region and by tribe? And what are all these treaty bases that we can pull from as well? So all of that touches every little bit of work that happens across Indian country. It's all with that legal backdrop, which means another phrase for our team is the emotional support attorneys. We often find ourselves tagged in on calls and conversations to be able to provide that background and that baseline of support and knowledge for all of the work that we do. My days differ a lot. I get to spend a lot of time deep diving a new federal regulation that has come out. And that might sound incredibly boring to y'all, but I have 67 pages of something printed over here and a highlighter ready to go, and I'm delighted to dive in. So it might be that. It might be chatting directly with tribal government representatives on something that they're passionate about or resources that they're excited to grow. It might be developing briefing resources for our stakeholders or for tribal leaders. It might be doing, the best term is probably outreach for non-native communities who are interested in learning more about how they can work effectively in Indian country. So that is a role we also play here at IFAI. It can look a lot of different ways, but standard operations are always how can we be responsive to the calls in Indian country.
A key aspect of IFAI's work is its integration with other teams within the organization. Kelli's legal team supports various departments, including food safety and tribal agricultural consultations.
The legal work that we do provides support across all of our buckets of work here at IFAI. If we're talking about the enterprise team and the incredible work that they get to do on food safety or tribal Department of Ag consultations, food safety is based in a law. It has a federal rule that goes with it, and you need folks who can navigate that to help support that work. For the tribal Department of Ag consultations, those might take laws on the books for a tribe, right? So how do you have folks involved in those conversations who are familiar with that work and can support it? We are lucky enough to work with a lot of tribes who want to share their lessons learned and want to share their information, and we get to be those messengers when we have their approval. And it means that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So it means every time that an attorney has had to navigate this for one tribe, it makes it easier for the next tribe to do it. It makes it easier for us to support the next tribe in doing it. So elongating the impact of that work to make it ripple throughout Indian country. So that's one example is our enterprise team. Our policy team and our legal team feel attached at the hip in the best possible way. The group of folks over there are, you couldn't ask for better people who are more passionate about the work that we do and are incredibly knowledgeable as well. Our work is complementary in many, many ways, and it means that we get to deep dive a lot of those research projects that I mentioned earlier together as well. And on the youth side, this is a personal passion that I have for next generation agriculture, but again, recognizing how much went into making this job a possibility for me and supporting me in my growth. What can I do to pass that on to the next generation? And we have a fantastic next gen team that I get to work with on that as well.
One surprising aspect of Kelli's role is how it deviates from the traditional image of a lawyer. Instead of courtroom battles, her work involves extensive research, community engagement, and providing practical resources.
I'm not doing what you might picture the second you picture attorney. I don't spend any time in a courtroom, right? I'm not filing cases. I'm not chasing down clients. I don't have to do timekeeping, thank goodness. So explaining what we do for legal work doesn't match a lot of what people picture for attorneys in the wild. What I get to do, like I mentioned, all of the work that we do before, but additionally, I'm not just in my office. I mean, I'm in today and I'm delighted to be here. But so much of the work we do is done in community. We can spend all the time in the world. Like I said, I've got my several pages and a highlighter ready to go, all the time in the world, deep diving the laws, deep diving the regulations. But if you do it out of context, if you do it out of community, it loses its impact. If you don't understand its relationship to the people it impacts every day and spend time with those people, then what needs to change becomes so far removed from the people that it impacts. Or what works becomes so far removed from the people that it impacts. So recognizing the relation of law, big L law, and the people that have to navigate it every day is essential for the work that we do. And additionally, navigating the law, hard air quotes on that, which I understand are difficult to picture in this audio format, but hard air quotes on big L law, navigating that for folks that maybe don't have a ton of experience in it is something that unfortunately is difficult and can make the law seem other and difficult to access, which is not the goal, right? Especially in our world, we want it to be accessible and navigable and easy to understand. So that takes spending time with a foot in both worlds, which I know a lot of us who work in Indian country are familiar with. So spending a lot of time with a foot in both worlds for here's the legal side of it and the policy side and the formal side, and here's how it works in everyday people's lives and how they impact. So spending time in community is an essential piece of the work that we do, and being that conduit between every little facet of the communities that invite us in and the law that impacts how they function from day to day.
This behind-the-scenes support is essential for making complex legal information accessible and actionable for tribal leaders and community members.
A lot of the things I listed sound really conceptual, and they are. Don't get me wrong. I spend a lot of time connecting points and chatting with folks and thinking through big thought processes of how will this impact in the long term or what changes will have what impact where. But you need things that actually make people's lives easier. That's always our work, right? And one of those things is briefing documents. I mentioned that we get to deep dive a lot of this information or do a lot of research. How do we make that usable to folks that we get to work with? And sometimes that takes the form of briefing documents that we prepare for our stakeholders, tribal agriculturalists, tribal leaders, program directors, all that kind of thing. And when I say briefing documents, I mean the 3 or 4 page summary of that 1,000-page long document that we've spent time skimming through. We understand that the incredible folks that we work with are very busy, right? You've got a program to run or a tribal operation to stay on top of, or you're legal attache for somebody and having to do that work as well. So how can we make your time as efficient as possible and gather information from a source that you trust? And we get to be that source, and we are honored to be that source. So we put together documents that essentially streamline the high points of information these folks will need. It also, I mentioned earlier how important it is that everything is in context. We have centuries of policies, of case law, of federal rules and regulations that are all in conversation with each other and impact every bit of work that we do. So in summarizing all of the information that we re-review and prepare to send out to our stakeholders, we also put it in context, right? How does this one piece impact the thing over here that you're also probably touching if you're a tribal government? You're going to have your hands on a lot of things. It's best that you know how they're in conversation with each other. So some of these briefing documents, in addition to that context that we can provide as well.
One of the impactful programs that IFAI supports is the National Association of Food Distribution Programs on Indian Reservations. Kelli and her team help navigate the legal aspects of this critical program.
Yes, I would love to chat more about NAFDPR, and we can start with what the acronym stands for, because it's all a bit of alphabet soup over here. So NAFDPR is the National Association of Food Distribution Program on Indian Reservations. And to say this all time and breath, we shorten it to NAFDPR. NAFDPR is an organization that is made up of program directors for the food distribution program on Indian reservations. Might be affectionately known as the COMODS program in your community. These are program directors who are operating at roughly 120 ITO, Indian tribal organizations, or ITOs, across the nation, who are operating those programs in communication with their communities every single day. A truly impressive group of people who are passionate about feeding their people and passionate about feeding their people well. That being in what foods go into it and how the food is delivered to folks as well. We are lucky enough to be able to support them again on some of that back office legal work. So helping to prepare briefing materials, navigating those regulations as they come down, conversations about what changes the Farm Bill has made and how that will impact the program, or across implementing new flexibilities or getting new foods in the program. We get to support them on that. And I want to make sure we recognize that it's these program directors in this board that are doing an incredible amount of work to make this program all it can for their citizens. And we get to be their backup dancers. I'm bad at dancing, but they appreciate my work all the same. Another way that we get to support the food distribution program on Indian reservations, the tribal leaders helping to steward that work, and the program directors ensuring that it works effectively with their communities, is by staffing the tribal leader consultation work group, which is not the same as NAFDPR, but does have a lot of crossover in membership and a lot of similar expertise. But this tribal leader work group meets 3 times a year in consultation with federal officials from USDA, particularly the Food and Nutrition Service there. This standing body has been in place again since about the time that IFAI started up, so going on a decade now. And these standing consultations are an open line of communication that is actually collaborative, right? It's not just a USDA official standing at a podium saying, here's what we're doing, y'all better figure it out. It is a conversation. It is a consultation with tribal leaders in the room to look at where the program is succeeding, where it may not be succeeding, and what changes can be made within it to ensure that it best serves the communities that it's meant to reach. That is all on our tribal leaders, right? They're the ones who have the power in consultations to have those conversations or to designate a proxy to do that. To be very clear, I've not been elected to anything. I am not a tribal leader or a proxy. I get to make those people's lives easier. And that often comes in the form of those briefing documents like we talked about, but also we get to be the receptacle of knowledge, right? I said this standing body has been there for a long time. It's had members come and go and changes over time. But we also have every copy of meeting notes since it started because our entity has been working to support those tribal leaders throughout the life of that consultation body. And we're going to keep doing it as long as they'll have us. So consultation and preparing tribal leaders for it and supporting them throughout it is an essential piece of our work, not only with the food distribution program, but across a lot of federal programs as well. And I look forward to hopefully chatting with you soon about how essential consultation is in these programs and what incredible work tribal leaders can do through that pathway to support their communities. But long before IFAI was working on this, we have decades of passionate tribal leader advocacy on this work to improve the program from, those black and white, undecorated, basic labels of questionable origin, right, to now having traditional foods and fresh foods and locally sourced opportunities in the food package that are delivered in ways citizens actually want it to be delivered. They can go to homes that have storage facilities to increase the degree of confidence you have in accessing this program as well. So we get to provide backup and support to a group of incredibly passionate folks who are doing everything they can to continue a legacy of work to improve this program for tribal citizens.
The work done with Nafa Dipper highlights the intersection of legal expertise and practical support, ensuring that essential food programs meet the needs of tribal communities effectively. As we conclude, Kelli reflects on her favorite aspects of working at IFAI. Her experiences on the road and direct engagement with communities stand out as particularly rewarding. These interactions reinforce the importance of context in both legal and policy work, highlighting how impactful and meaningful her role can be.
Oh, goodness. They are numerous. Like I mentioned earlier, we spend a lot of time on the road. That is a common occurrence, I think, for folks who work throughout Indian country in an effort to make sure that we reach all corners and are able to provide support for folks across the nation. Maybe less a specific story and more of a fun pattern that I've picked up in my few years of work is because we spend so much time on the road, I have had more opportunities to chat with folks who do this work in airports on layovers than you would have ever imagined. I am running into maybe attorneys who do this work too, who have provided such support to me over the years, or tribal leaders who are neck deep in trying to navigate something. And somewhere by gate B39 in DFW, we're going to figure out how to do it. And being able to, you may not always catch me on my best if I'm sweating, hauling between gates, trying to make a connection, but I'll sure have a business card on me and I'll sure try to help. Or I've probably caught some people on not their best sweating and hauling for a short connection, but have always taken the time to offer support. And so that incredible outpouring of passion for the work, like I said, not relegated to me and can even be found on a rough travel day, is common throughout Indian country as well.
That's all for today's episode of Rooted Wisdom. A huge thanks to Kelli Case for sharing her experiences and insights with us. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Join us next time as we continue to explore the intersection of politics, policy, and personal stories in Indian country food and ag. Until then, stay rooted.